one and all, once again, back to Exploring Arda. And normally, I would say normally, not all the time, but most times I usually read stuff aside from, Lord of the Rings, but today's a little different because it is Hobbit Day, after all. So it's a very special day for all of us Tolkien fans, I would say, whether you have, watched the movies, read the books, done both, Hobbit Day is just universally just a really nice day for any any Tolkien fans. So it's really fun to do that. Because of that, I was wondering what to do for Hobbit Day. So basically what I'm going to be doing today, that'll be a little shorter episode, but I will be reading actually from Fellowship of the Ring. It has actually a really cool cover that I recently got here. I really like the artwork on this one, but I'll be basically reading the most of A Long Expected Party, because that's basically a fun little chapter. It's basically like the party of Bilbo. And technically Frodo, because they both share the same birthday and whatnot, and I'm sure a lot of you guys already know that. But that's basically what we're going to be doing today, reading through Bilbo's party for Hobbit Day, because it's fun. And without any other ramblings, we'll just get right into the chapter of A Long Expected Party. So, let's go. The next day, more carts rolled up the hill, and still more carts. There might have been some grumbling about dealing locally, but that very week, orders began to pour out of Bag End for every kind of provision, commodity, or luxury that could be obtained in Hobbiton or Bywater or anywhere in the neighborhood. People became enthusiastic, and they began to tick off the days on the calendar, and they watched eagerly for the postman, hoping for their invitations. Before long, the invitations began pouring out, and the Hobbiton post office was blocked, and the Bywater post office was snowed under, and voluntary assistant postmen were called for. There was a constant stream of them going up the hill, carrying hundreds of polite variations on, "Thank you, I shall certainly come." A notice appeared on the gate at Bag End. No admittance except on party business. Even those who had or pretended to have party business were seldom allowed inside. Bilbo was busy, writing invitations, ticking off answers, packing up presents, and making some private preparations of his own. From the time of Gandalf's arrival, he remained hidden from view. One morning, the hobbits woke up to find the large field, south of Bilbo's front door, covered with ropes and poles for tents and pavilions. A special entrance was cut into the bank leading to the road, and wide steps and a large white gate were built there. The three hobbit families of Bagshot Row, adjoining the field, were intensely interested and generally envied. Old Gaffer Gamgee stopped even pretending to work in his garden. The tents began to go up. There was a especially large pavilion, so big that the tree that grew in the field was right inside of it, and stood proudly near one end, at the head of the chief table. Lanterns were hung on all its branches. More promising still, to the hobbit's mind, an enormous open-air kitchen was erected in the north corner of the field. A draught of cooks, from every inn and eating house for miles around, arrived to supplement the dwarves and other odd folk that were quartered at Bag End. Excitement rose to its height. Then the weather clouded over. That was on Wednesday, the eve of the party. Anxiety was intense. Then Thursday, September the 22nd, actually dawned. The sun got up, the clouds vanished, flags were unfurled, and the fun began. Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one. Practically everybody living near was invited. A very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Many people from other parts of the Shire also were asked, and there were even a few from outside the borders. Bilbo met the guests and additions at the new White Gate in person. He gave away presents to all and sundry. The latter were those who went out again by a back way and came in again by the gate. Hobbits give presents to other people on their own birthdays. Not very expensive ones, as a rule, and not so lavishly on this occasion, but it was not a bad system. Actually, in Hobbiton and Bywater, every day in the year was someone's birthday, so that every hobbit in those parts had a fair chance of at least one present at least once a week. But they never got tired of them. On this occasion, the presents were unusually good. The hobbit children were so excited that for a while they almost forgot about eating. There were toys the like of which they had never seen before, all beautiful and some obviously magical. Many of them had indeed been ordered a year before, and had come all the way from the mountain and from Dale, and were of real dwarf make. When every guest had been welcomed and was finally inside the gate, there were songs, dances, music, games, and of course, food and drink. There were 3 official meals: lunch, tea, and dinner, or supper. But lunch and tea were marked chiefly by the fact at those times all the guests were sitting down and eating together. At other times there were merely lots of people eating and drinking, continuously from 11 until 6:30, when the fireworks started. The fireworks were by Gandalf. They were not only brought by him, but designed and made by him, and the special effects, set pieces, and flights of rockets were let off by him. But there were also a generous distribution of squibs, crackers, bacca wrappers, sparklers, torches, dwarf candles, elf fountains, goblin barkers, and thunderclaps. They were all superb. The art of Gandalf improved with age. There were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds, singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke, their leaves open like a whole spring unfolding in a moment, and their shining branches dropped glowing flowers down upon the astonished hobbits, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touched their upturned faces. There were fountains of butterflies that flew glittering into the trees. There were pillars of colored fires that rose and turned into eagles, or sailing ships, or a phalanx of flying swans. There was a red thunderstorm and a shower of yellow rain. There was a forest of silver spears that sprang suddenly into the air with a yell, like an embattled army, and came down again into the water with a hiss like 100 hot snakes. And there was also one last surprise in honor of Bilbo, and it startled the hobbits exceedingly, as Gandalf intended. The lights went out. A great smoke went up. It shaped itself like a mountain seen in the distance, and began to glow at the summit. It sprouted green and scarlet flames. Out flew a red golden dragon, not life-size, but terribly lifelike. Fire came from its jaws, his eyes glaring down. There was a roar, and he whizzed 3 times over the heads of the crowd. They all ducked, and many fell flat on their faces. The dragon passed like an express train, turned a somersault, and burst over Bywater with a deafening explosion. "That is the signal for supper," said Bilbo. The pain and alarm vanished at once, and the prostrate hobbits leaped to their feet. There was a splendid supper for everyone, that is, except those invited to the special family dinner party. This was held in the great pavilion within the tree. The invitations were limited to 12 dozen, a number also called by the hobbits 1 gross, though the word was not considered proper to use of people, and the guests were selected from all the families to which Bilbo and Frodo were related, with the addition of a few special unrelated friends, such as Gandalf. Many young hobbits were included, and present by parental permission, for hobbits were easygoing with their children in the matter of sitting up late, especially when there was a chance of getting them a free meal. Bringing up hobbits took a lot of provender. There were many Bagginses and Boffins, and also many Tooks and Brandybooks. There were various Grubbs, relations of Bilbo Baggins' grandmother, and various Chubbs, connections of his Took grandfather, and a selection of Burrowses, Bolgers, Bracegirdles, Brockhouses, Goodbodies, Hornblowers, and Proudfoots. Some of these were only very distantly connected with Bilbo, and some had hardly ever been in Hobbiton before, as they lived in remote corners of the Shire. The Sackville Bagginses were not forgotten. Otho and his wife Lobelia were present. They disliked Bilbo and detested Frodo, but so magnificent was the invitation card, written in golden ink, that they had felt it was impossible to refuse. Besides, their cousin Bilbo had been specializing in food for many years, and his table had a high reputation. All the 144 guests expected a pleasant feast, though they rather dreaded the after-dinner speech of their host, an inevitable item. He was liable to drag in bits of what he called poetry, and sometimes, after a glass or two, would allude to the absurd adventures of his mysterious journey. The guests were not disappointed. They had a very pleasant feast. In fact, an engrossing entertainment. Rich, abundant, varied, and prolonged. The purchase of provisions fell almost to nothing throughout the district in the ensuing weeks. But as Bilbo's catering had depleted the stocks of most of the stores, cellars, and warehouses for miles around, that did not matter much. After the feast, more or less, came the speech. Most of the company were, however, now in a tolerant mood, at that delightful stage which they called filling up the corners. They were sipping their favorite drinks and nibbling at their favorite dainties, and their fears were forgotten. They were prepared to listen to anything and to cheer at every full stop. "My dear people," began Bilbo, rising in his place. "Hear, hear, hear," they shouted, and kept on repeating it in chorus, seeming reluctant to follow their own advice. Bilbo left his place and went and stood on a chair under the illuminated tree. The light of the lanterns fell on his beaming face. The golden buttons shone on his embroidered silk waistcoat. They could all see him standing, waving one hand in the air. The other was in his trouser pocket. "My dear Bagginses and Boffins," he began again, "and my dear Tooks and Brandybooks, and Grubbs and Chubbs, and Burrowses and Hornblowers, and Bulgers, Bracegirdles, Goodbodies, Brockhouses, and Proudfoots." "Proud feet!" shouted an elderly hobbit from the back of the pavilion. His name, of course, was Proudfoot, and well merited. His feet were large, exceptionally furry, and both were on the table. "Proudfoots," repeated Bilbo. "Also my good Sackville Bagginses that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 111 today." "Hooray! Hooray! Many happy returns!" they shouted, and they hammered joyously on the tables. Bilbo was doing splendidly. This was the sort of stuff that they liked. Short and obvious. "I hope you are all enjoying yourselves as much as I am." Deafening cheers. Cries of yes and no. Noises of trumpets and horns, pipes and flutes, and other musical instruments. There were, as has been said, many young hobbits present. Hundreds of musical crackers had been pulled. Most of them bore the mark Dale on them, which did not convey much to most of the hobbits, but they all agreed that they were marvelous crackers. They contained instruments small, but of perfect make and enchanting tones. Indeed, in one corner, some of the young Tooks and Brandybooks, supposing Uncle Bilbo to have finished, since he had plainly said all that was necessary, now got up an impromptu orchestra and began a merry dance tune. Master Everard Took and Miss Melilot Brandybook got on the table and with bells in their hands began to dance the Sprinkle Ring, a pretty dance, but rather vigorous. But Bilbo had not finished. Seizing a horn from a youngster nearby, he blew 3 loud hoots. The noise subsided. "I shall not keep you long," he cried. Cheers from all the assembly. "I have called you all together for a purpose." Something in the way that he said this made an impression. There was almost silence, and 1 or 2 of the Tooks pricked up their ears. "Indeed, for 3 purposes. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 11 years is too short a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits." Tremendous outburst of approval. "I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve." This was unexpected, and rather difficult. There was some scattered clapping, but most of them were trying to work it out and see if it came to a compliment. "Secondly, to celebrate my birthday." Cheers again. "I should say our birthday, for it is, of course, also the birthday of my heir and nephew, Frodo. He comes of age and into his inheritance today." Some perfunctory clapping by the elders, and some loud shouts of "Frodo! Frodo! Jolly old Frodo!" from the juniors. The Sackville Bagginses scowled, and wondered what was meant by coming into his inheritance. "Together we score 144. Your numbers were chosen to fit this remarkable total. 1 gross, if I may use the expression." No cheers. This was ridiculous. Many of the guests, and especially the Sackville Bagginses, were insulted, feeling sure they had only been asked to fill up the required number, like goods in a package. 1 gross indeed. Vulgar expression. It is also, if I may be allowed to refer to ancient history, the anniversary of my arrival by barrel at Escaroth on the Long Lake. Though the fact that it was my birthday slipped my memory on that occasion. I was only 51 then, and birthdays did not seem so important. The banquet was very splendid, however, though I had a bad cold at the time, I remember, and I could only say, "Thank you very much," and now I repeat it more correctly, "Thank you very much for coming to my little party." Obstinate silence. They all feared that a song or some poetry was now imminent, and they were getting bored. Why couldn't he stop talking and let them drink his health? But Bilbo did not sing or recite. He paused for a moment. "Third and finally," he said, "I wish to make an announcement." He spoke this last word so loudly and suddenly that everyone sat up who still could. I regret to announce that, though, as I said, 11 years is far too short a time to spend among you, this is the end. I am going. I am leaving now. Goodbye." He stepped down and vanished. There was a blinding flash of light, and the guests all blinked. When they opened their eyes, Bilbo was nowhere to be seen. 144 flabbergasted hobbits sat back speechless. Old Odo Proudfoot removed his feet from the table and stamped. Then there was a dead silence until suddenly, after several deep breaths, every Baggins, Boffin, Took, Brandybook, Grubb, Chubb, Burrows, Bolger, Bracegirdle, Brockhouse, Goodbody, Hornblower, and Proudfoot began to talk at once. And yeah, I think that's a good one. I'll say I'll stop at that one because I'll have to save these books for a very long time from now. But that's basically the gist of what happens at Bilbo's party. They all pretty much go into an uproar after that, just saying that Bilbo's really crazy. Because you can obviously tell some of the hobbits are very... they got their favorites, and some of them, Bilbo's not one of them, but... I just thought it would be kind of fun to read through Bilbo's speech and what happens at the party, and how Gandalf includes fireworks that were made by him, designed and made by him, and all that fun stuff. Yeah, I don't know, just a nice little fun thing. It's good to kind of just read through. There's no references except for maybe Dale in the Dwarven folk, which we don't really see it too lot at the party. But obviously with Dale some of it is magical, so obviously this is, I don't know, maybe some of Thorne's company decided to help with the little magical toys. That'd be kind of fun. It would make sense too. But yeah, it's always fun how the Sackville Bagginses are always the enemies, the chief enemies of the Baggins, is the Sackville Bagginses, which is always really funny. I know later in the chapter, I think, when either this chapter or the next one, where Frodo's trying to scramble getting things together, he basically does end up selling Bag End to the Sackville Bagginses, but not until I don't even know. I think it was after the 17 years when he was waiting for Gandalf. So he still waits a long time, but it's kind of funny. Of course, you get the good old Proud Feet guy. I mean, everybody loves Odo. Odo Proudfoot is awesome. So, but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that little retelling of the long expected party. There's more to it, obviously, to the chapter, but I didn't want to go too far. Just want to get that party out of the way. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully you guys have a nice Hobbit day and the rest of fall. I mean, fall is definitely approaching, so I feel like just, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit in general is just it's a good starting point in the fall. I don't know, something about it. You can just kind of sit down, enjoy the weather, and read some really good fiction. So, and Lord of the Rings is perfect for that, especially right here because it's literally in September. So, but yeah, other than that, with the ramblings and talks out of the way, hopefully you guys enjoyed this short little episode for Hobbit Day. Hopefully you guys have a very pleasant Hobbit Day, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Farewell.